Hello, and welcome back to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic. Today we'll be talking about episodes 13 and 13. We're just talking about episode 13, so grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. Episode 13 is called Battle Lesson. This is the episode summary. So the episode summary begins mid-battle between Dractyl and Takinam. Tom is Dractyl, and he's fighting for his life. He loses. We learn that Tom has been on a losing streak ever since he lost his Maxor. His confidence is shaken. Frustrated, he goes to the Rock River Canyon after learning about Codemaster matches and that he may be close to battling Krellin. At the canyon, he thinks he sees Maxor, but his attempt to follow him leads him to a player in trouble. Tom helps to save the player and they spark a friendship. After emotionally dumping on the player, he decides to give Tom some pointers, so they head to the Beta-Drome. What was supposed to be a 6-on-6 battle is actually a 6-on-1 battle. Tom's team versus Ursus with the draw skin. Surprise! Tom is actually battling and getting tips from a Codemaster, specifically Codemaster Krellin. Tom gains confidence, almost makes a comeback, but doesn't, and Tom loses the match. But now he's confident and wistful. That was our episode summary today. And now we will be moving on to analysis. So honestly, this is a beautiful episode. They add some really artsy flourishes, like at the end when Tom walks into the light, like he loses the battle drum and then the door opens and he like walks into the light that's a circle and he's silhouetted and it's like, ooh, yes, dramatic, so scrummy and compositionally interesting. The circle is off center, he's walking across. Or at the very end, they show Tom so small in comparison to the quite large Krellin drum, really emphasizing the power imbalance. That Tom now looks to Krellin as a mentor, and it's kind of an sunrise, sunsetty orange. So the whites aren't like a true white, they lean more orange. So we have this like orangey blue composition where the complementary colors are like being ooey gooey, and it's doing the thing where that like movie posters do with the blue orange. It's meant to like be not only visually appealing but like evoke something in you because blue and orange, complementary colors that are across from each other on the color wheel, that is art. But I think using these artful moments at the end really help to emphasize like the wistful mood. Tom is longing for what? Um, let's figure it out. He's longing to break his losing streak, for the days that he once had with Maxor, for an oncoming day in which he meets Krellin again. He's longing for a present that hasn't occurred, and for a future that he can commit to. What doesn't it doesn't really matter what he's longing for. It just matters that he longs. you know, this episode ends with Tom longing. He longs. He yearns. But this is an incredibly character-driven episode. And we've kind of taken these detours recently into Kaz or into underworld politics, into gender politics, which do all contribute to the show as a whole. But Tom, who was introduced as our protagonist, like we've taken some breaks from him, and this episode really grounds us back in that version of the show and his experience. This episode shows Tom down on his luck. He starts the episode in an incredibly frustrated place, and he has been pushed to his limit. So much so that he kind of lashes out at his friends when they overwhelm him with Codemaster stuff. And oh my gosh, take you I'm really gonna take you on a journey talking about this episode. So, an intro to acting for the non-major, which is a college course that I took, we did some Uta Hagen exercises, and our final was to do an improvised scene where one character had to look for something in the room and they couldn't find it, and maybe their goal was to leave, I don't remember. but then the other character had to come in and enter and create a conflict. It was something like that. Like one character had to look for something, and one character had to enter, and one character's objective was to leave. There was, you know, I don't fully remember the prompt, but those were elements that we had. So, of course, in order to do this, you had to sit down with your partner and talk about who's your character, who's my character, what's your relationship, how long have we known each other, how long has it been since we've seen each other, what's our conflict going to be. And so basically, you had to craft a story and circumstances that that would erupt into a conflict during the improvisation. So this final was an improv piece based on those like circumstances that one person was looking for something, one person had to leave or enter, whatever. And so in order to have a good improv piece, you had to lay that foundation of what our dynamic is so that like you don't just go up there and improv. You had to improv within the realms of the the world that you've created. And that's how I'm going to describe it. But I remember we were getting this note on our scene to go further and to like really go at it, to really like, there's a conflict, to really conflict. And at the time, I was kind of like, why? Like, it's still an interesting scene if we're not yelling at each other, but it wasn't about yelling, it was about emotion. It was about having the characters feel the most deep like the most deeply that they could and express it in the most raw and authentic way that they could, and that's what draws you in, right? The circumstances aren't what is interesting, the emotion is. And so that's what, like watching these other scenes, I was like, dang, they're just yelling at each other. And yelling isn't what's interesting. When a character yells, it's why they're yelling that's important. It's, Tom has an outburst at his friends, and he's not outbursting because, like, for the sake of outbursting. He's outbursting because he's been pushed to such an emotional place that he has no other raw and authentic way to express his emotions. And so that's what I learned from Intro to Acting for the Non-Major, is that, you know, we weren't pushing our scene far enough. We were having conflict, but they were still expressing emotions. The characters were still expressing emotions in a way that was guarded, when having that having that wall lift to see authenticity is what is intriguing and you can connect with as an audience. So I guess I did learn things in college, but to connect that back to Tom, in this character driven episode, Tom has to feel and express his emotions in this raw and honest way for us to connect with the story. There isn't a whole lot going on with this episode, and so we have to connect to Tom emotionally for the story to work. It's what elevates this episode from entertainment to a story in some way. Right? This episode has catharsis. And since this is the second time I've brought up catharsis, we might as well talk about it. I I, you know, I love catharsis, I do. But Aristotle was a man who talked about many things, and one of those things that he just happened to talk about was catharsis and theater in general. Aristotle had 6 elements to theater: plot, character, theme, diction, music, spectacle. Plot, character, theme, music, diction, spectacle. Great. And he also identified catharsis as an essential part of the process. And catharsis, definitionally, is like a shedding of emotion, particularly as an audience, like in reference to theater. Catharsis is when the audience sheds emotion. And so, right, if something is feeling cathartic, it's the same word, right? Cathartic comes from catharsis. And so, watching a story go along should be a cathartic experience in some way. You should feel catharsis at some point in that journey. Now, Aristotle's writings about theater mostly pertain to tragedies because His writing on comedies are lost to time or history or probably fire, let's be honest. But the man talks about narrative storytelling and particularly as it pertains to tragedies. And, in tragedy, the audience should have a moment where they feel. The audience feels, they feel, they have catharsis. And that's what this episode achieves, I think, is that when Tom walks into the sunlight and he's wistful and he's yearning and he's longing and he's hopeful, like that's when the catharsis happens. It really hits you. But Tom has been pushed to his limit at the beginning of this episode, and the narrative arc encaptures and embraces a moment of growth for him. Tom has been scapegoating his failures onto no longer having a Maxor as a weapon in his arsenal. So, as the theme is echoed and echoed, it's not your cards, it's the player. It's the player, not the cards, Tom. Tom has to come to accept that his failures in the Drome were his own, and like that was his doing because his confidence was shaken. Now, he may not have confidence just yet, but he has the ability to recognize that his like that he is his own secret weapon. That the weapon in Tom's deck that made him win in the past wasn't Maxor, it was him. Having good cards did not make him win. Tom having himself made him win. Tom had to fight to win. And now that he is no longer misplacing the responsibility, he is capable to win once more. That's our arc, right? He starts scapegoating his failures and his wins onto his tools rather than himself. And so he has to come to learn to accept that he's responsible for his own actions. And even though we don't see him win in this episode, we see him come to accept that truth. And with such a character-driven episode, we get more characterization of Tom and examples of his personality, right? He's hot-headed, he blows up at his friends. He has emotional intelligence when he's able to recognize that, hey, this is a lot right now. I need some emotional solitude to process the overwhelming emotions that I'm having. So I'm going to head over to Ravenel Ridge or whatever. We see that, he likes to help people. He saves Krellin, and he has incredible upper body strength. But these are just some examples of how this episode reinforces the characterization that we already have of Tom. And this episode is really broken into three parts. We have our first battle, which is the hook. Fantasy wrestling, they're giving you a match off the bat. You're being drawn in. And then the conversation at Chaotic is exposition. We get info about the inciting incident, about Tom's losing streak, and like the Codemaster Chaotic stuff. Then Rock River Canyon, we have a rising action. The Betadrome is the challenge along the way. We have the bump in the road when he discovered that it's 6v1. That hurts his ego a little bit. It's a little bump in the road. And then the climax is that final battle between Tingith Toborn and Ursus, when Tom finally discovers how to defeat the Drawskin and Ursus. Right? He comes to a realization that I have the capability to defeat this creature battle gear combination. Following action, Tom loses the battle. But then that resolution is Tom visiting the Krellindrome just to ponder and think. He comes to that conclusion, he comes to accept. Right? In the character-driven episode, the resolution is character-focused. And so it's broken into those three parts of like, we have the first battle, we have the in-between, and we have the second battle. They also use voiceover as a means to express Tom's inner thoughts a lot during this episode. It's a really thinky episode, which, is a very common tactic to have the voiceover tell us the thoughts. But it is necessary in an episode like this because we need to hear Tom's thoughts to see how they progress and change throughout the story. It's character driven. We need to be able to see and recognize that character growth. It's a big voiceover episode. Onto the theme. There are some pretty explicit lessons in this episode.
which is pretty fitting for an episode called Battle Lessons. We get some lessons, we're taught things. um, and the four explicit pieces of advice that Krellin gives Tom are: one, look before you leap; two, sometimes you learn more from losing than winning; three, you can't win with that attitude; and four, what matters is how you face the challenges that we encounter, right? And of course, we get the lovely Tom, and of what? And of course, we get the lovely advice that it's not the cards, it's the player. It's the player, not the cards, which is really just a rebrand for the phrase. It's really just a rebrand for the phrase, a poor craftsman blames his tools, which is true.
Of course, good tools help you get a good result, but having good tools and bad technique doesn't get you anywhere. You know, you can have bad tools and bad technique, you can have good tools and good technique, but having good tools doesn't give you good technique. So, extrapolating all of those pointers, we land somewhere in the theme that when you encounter a problem, face it with a good attitude. Sometimes you will lose, but use that as a learning opportunity because challenges are opportunities to grow. Now, is that a theme or advice? You know what I mean? But that's the realm of what this episode gives. It gives when you encounter a problem, face it with a good attitude. Sometimes you'll lose, but if you have a good attitude, you can use that opportunity to grow because that's what a challenge is, an opportunity to grow. And sometimes it's good to hear that because sometimes you don't internalize a lesson until you actually learn it for yourself. Right? Tom was being told time and time again, it's not the cards, it's you. Tom, it's you. But he didn't understand that until he understood that. A lot of the times, I feel like we hear advice and we're like, that's so cliche. You know, that's just advice. But then you go through life and you learn those lessons for yourself and you're like, wait a minute, did I just learn a cliche that I've heard about for my whole entire life? And so sometimes, especially for Tom, he has to learn the lesson manually instead of going the easy route of learning the lesson through people telling him the lesson. Now, other things I want to mention are Tom is actually a good chaotic player, but we can't attribute all of that to his instinct. He has two mentors now. Peyton pretty explicitly mentors him in episode 3, and now Krellin is giving him tips and tricks. Right? Tom is a good chaotic player, which, you know, he does have good instincts. He won his first battle all by himself, but he didn't do this all by himself. He's learning and growing because people are helping him. And I think that's something that's noteworthy. And additionally, what's interesting is Tom loses both of the matches that he's being mentored in. It goes to prove Carlin's point that sometimes you learn more when you lose than when you win, right? Tom needs to learn these lessons manually in order for them to really cement. And it's also kind of Pixar-esque in a way of like, you don't get what you want, but you get what you need. Tom, what he wants is to win. Tom wants to win a battle. He wants to break his losing streak, and he wants to win. But that's not what he needs. What Tom needs is he needs to understand that he's in control of his own fate and destiny, and that he's responsible for how he plays in the drone. It's him, it's not his cards, right? And so he learns that lesson. He gets what he needed, but he didn't get what he wanted. He didn't win the battle. He didn't break his losing streak, but he got what he needed, and now that he's capable of doing it in the future. Another piece of analysis I have is that I just want to point out Krellin's human clothes is Krellin is dressed as the inverse of Tom, which is kind of crazy because they already look so similar. Krellin is wearing a blue turtleneck with gray pants, and Tom famously wears a gray shirt with blue jeans. And so the gray and the blue are inversed. And I think it's interesting that they have this mentor relationship while wearing similar color schemes, but making it different. And so what we can analyze and extrapolate from that, I want to hear what you say. Also, at the conversation at the table with the gang at the end, someone implies that maybe Codemaster Krellin set this whole thing up, which my instinct is, no, that's so dumb, why would he do that? But I think this is an odd thing to bring up and to write in a script, even if it doesn't mean anything, right? It's intentional that they wrote this line in the script. And so, like, Krellin could have looked up where Tom last ported to and intentionally gone there and, like, been in trouble, which is strange. That's weird for Krellin to do. Follow somebody just to teach them a lesson? I don't know about that. But, I think because it's said, it's worth examining as a point of view. Did Krellin set this whole thing up? Like, that is unusual for him to do, but, maybe he's taken a liking to Tom. Maybe he's Tom for the future. They wear the same color scheme after all, and they already look alike. But, who knows? Who knows? Did he set this up? Did he not set this up? It's ambiguous, just like so many things are. On to lore. Of course, we get all the lore on Codemaster battles in this episode. The concept was originally introduced in episode 1, I believe, but we dive deeper into this episode. We know there are 7 Codemasters who each run a battle drum. But now we learn that you are allowed to challenge a Codemaster if you have 7 wins in the drum. Or if you get 7 wins in their specific drum, the Codemaster is also allowed to challenge you. If they're interested, they may not always be interested. But we get some name drops. Imthor, Amzin, Churl, and Krellin, of course. What? Imthor, Amzin, Churl, and Krellin. Right? These are 4 Codemasters that are name dropped in the show. And later we get Hotek, which will be the 5 names of Codemasters that I believe that we get in the series. Now, looking at Tom's battle record on the show, yes, I am keeping a spreadsheet of everybody's battles. So that's interesting. Thanks, Google Sheets. But we have only seen him battle 7 times on this show. 3 of those were wins, and 2 of which were confirmed to be in the Krellin drone, either by words or by like a wide shot on the Krellin drone. And so we've only seen Tom collect 2 wins in the Krellin drone. He's not actually all that close to a Codemaster battle from our perspective as an audience. But this reminds us that time passes in between the episodes, and when we see an episode, it's just a window into the moment that tells a good story or has highlighted an emotional experience or extreme circumstances. Your run of the mill chaotic match may be exciting, but not in a way that justifies giving it airtime or showing every single match live on screen for us as a viewer. We also established that if you beat a Codemaster in a Codemaster match, you get a prize, and that prize is a really rare or freaky location scan. And we're given some lore about how freaky and rare Codemaster's cards are, creatures, attacks, locations, battle gear, etc., and we get to see some in action. This is the first time we see Prexor Chasm, which is a pretty freaky and dangerous location. It has a purplish overcast, which makes it seem even more unnatural than it already is. And we also see Ursus for the first time. This introduces to us tribeless cards. Although we never get that narratively in the show, we know from the physical cards that Ursus is tribeless, which creates a new tribe classification, or lack thereof. Interestingly, when we see Ursus on Krellin's team, they give him blue music counters, which leads us to believe as an audience that he's an overworld creature. But as we know from real life, he is tribeless. So those are some examples of freaky Codemaster cards that we're introduced to in this episode. But the big thing that I wrote down for lore is the Codemaster ID card. This is like a Power Ranger transformation into a fancy outfit, and it has to work in any drome, right? Codemaster Krellin battles Tom in the beta drome, and that's where he pulls out the card to reveal that he's Codemaster Krellin. So these Codemaster cards that give you a Power Ranger morph sequence, they work anywhere in Chaotic in the battle dromes. And narratively, Krellin and Tom have to battle in the battle drome because the battle or the in the beta drum because the beta drum is where the codemasters aren't watching and you can have any rules. And that's why Krellin has to have this battle in the beta drum because he can do 6v1 and in the beta drum you can have any rules. It's also a good thing that they didn't do it in the Krellin drum because then Krellin would have to referee himself. But the technology lines in the beta drum during the Codemaster transformation, they like turn into a light show, and Krellin reveals a nice outfit that coincides with the theming of his drone's architecture and his color palette. So great branding there for Krellin. So the ID card specifically is new technology that I wanted to point out from this episode. I just think it's fun. You know, who knew that the Codemasters had a great branding team? You know, Krellin gets the blue and white and the gray and this asymmetrical swoop, and that's his whole thing. You know, his outfit, his battle drum, everything. On to fun facts and other notes. Sky Battle bird puns. What more is there to say? I also, in my notes, I have mentioned Tom's insane upper body strength when he like picks up Krellin from hanging off the edge. And then also, is Krellin hot? Is Krellin hot? And I also wrote, take a shot every time they say Codemaster. So those are some fun other notes. Also, I love Arbor Smash. Big Arbor Smash fan here because it's Arbor Smash is like Arbor means tree and it's just a log and that is so funny to me. Arbor Smash log. I don't know, there's just something about it, a nice ambiance to it. And finally what I want to talk about is this episode feels like a season finale to me and it's the 13th episode, which typically TV shows are ordered in 26 episode seasons, or if they want a trial run after a pilot, networks can order 13 seasons, or 13 episodes, which is half the season. And so, with its artful style and its catharsis, and it has a feel of a season finale, it's just like, you know, we complete a narrative arc with Tom here. He grows and changes, and in this children's TV show, we don't have those like overarching narrative arcs all that often, or like emotional growth in any real way. It's kind of sitcom settings where like you reset every episode with the same circumstances, which isn't always true for all of Chaotic. Chaotic is kind of unique in that way, but because Tom, our protagonist, has this emotional arc, it just resonates as like a season finale. I did look at the release schedule a little bit, and the next episode was released. There was one more episode released before there was a significant break, so it's not like it was a season finale. You know, you still have the Borth Majar episode in the release schedule, but also season one is 40 episodes, and they're just all season one. And I have an issue where the season one break is. That's just always bothered me, but we'll get there when we get there. So it makes me wonder from a meta perspective if like Chaotic was ordered for 13 episodes or if it was ordered for 40 and like why why now? Why the 13th episode? It's just a typical turning point for the format of TV. So, some final thoughts I have are this is an iconic episode, but I always forget about her. It's just I don't know, like the emotional beat is such a turn from left field from the last two episodes that I don't anticipate it. It's like I never anticipate Krellin being introduced so soon because I know later we have our Codemaster battles that we get to deal with, but I forget that they lay that foundation. They sow the seeds of that really early on in episode 13. And Chaotic is smart in that way of like they're laying that foundation now so that when we come back to it later, it makes sense and there's an emotional impact there, right? And so I think, you know, Krellin and Ursus and the Drawskin are all iconic in their own right, whether narratively or as a collector. trust, I know about the Droskin, but I always forget. Like this episode is not memorable to me in a way that some other episodes are. And even though it's not memorable, it's still so unique in its storytelling that I think it is an important episode and like have it's and I think it's impressive to show such a variety of different storytelling techniques all in one show. This is a character driven piece, this episode, and we don't get a lot of character driven pieces in Chaotic. And so that twist of genre, that twist of format, and showing variety in that way, I think gives props to the ability and storytelling capabilities of the show. I just think it's interesting that they show that variety and it's impressive. I think it's impressive in an artful manner. All that to say, I like this episode. It's a good episode and it's solid. You know what I mean? It is solid. And so, those are my thoughts. With that, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!